So many of us, when we think of isolation, we think of a locking of the doors, taking away of the keys, like this real physical isolation, maybe a restriction of how a vehicle can be used. Like you can't get in your vehicle, you can't go anywhere, or maybe you're being tracked, things like that. There's this very physical sense to the word isolation. But on this channel, I talk a lot about emotional abuse and verbal abuse. And there's an isolation that comes with emotional abuse that isn't encapsulated when we talk about that real physical isolation. The isolation that can come with emotional abuse can almost, in the moment, almost feels like a choice that you are making. At least that's how I felt. It didn't feel like I was being told, don't see your friends, don't be with family. I never was actually told that. It became something that I felt like I was choosing for myself in a way. And now looking back, I can see it in a very different way. So, we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the isolation that comes with emotional abuse and how quiet and how subtle that is. And it's something that's really hard to talk about if you've never really been through it, or maybe hard to understand if you've never been through it. I've got my coffee. Let's just talk about what isolation can look like in those relationships. When I was still with my ex, there were so many moments that I can think back on where we went and we spent time with family and or friends, and I got back in the car feeling like really happy, right? You get a night out, you get to spend time with family. Maybe I'm a little tired because it's exhausting. And we get in the car or we get home and my ex just like lays into me about something I said. Like, and it's not even on my radar. um and I feel just completely taken aback, and it completely ruins the whole night for me because I in that moment I'm looking back on the whole night and going, what did I say that made you so mad? And oh, why did I? And I'm trying to defend myself, but there's no winning an argument like that where someone's just trying to criticize you for no reason. So it's like so many moments were ruined because my ex afterward would kind of come at me for something I said, something that like was not even on my radar at all, something so inconsequential, but to him it was a big deal. um, and so there were so many moments like that. So there became a point where I stopped inviting my ex out. Part of it was he didn't really want to go out anyway. Um, but I also knew that if he did come out, I really had to watch myself because I knew he could just grab onto anything that I said or did and hold on to that until the end of the night and then bring it up with me. So I stopped inviting him out. The same thing happened when we would invite people into our home. Um, it felt like every friend that came over, there would be a criticism of them, like a, oh, can you believe they did this? Or why are you friends with that person? Or we shouldn't spend time with them. It just, there was constantly this conversation happening about the friends that I had in my life and even his own friends. Um, it also happened with my family. I have multiple memories where I had family over, including my mom, um, and he said that they couldn't be trusted. They couldn't be trusted in our house. They couldn't be trusted alone in our house with absolutely no reason not to trust them. They're like my mom even now is like my most trusted person in my whole life. Like I trust her with my life, my children's life, with anything. And it doesn't really matter the details of it, right? Like the fact is that I was being told by my husband of the time that my closest family member couldn't be trusted in my home. And what could I like, how could I argue against that? I mean, I tried, I certainly tried, but I could not change his mind. And so there came points where even having family over was really, really hard. And I just kind of stopped doing it. So this sense of isolation really was happening to me, and it didn't feel like he was standing there saying you can't have them over, because he didn't ever say those words. He never said you can't have them over or you can't go out. He never said that. But he made it so frustrating and so difficult and so hard to spend time with friends, to spend time with family, that eventually it was just easier not to do it. So it was just easier for me to be at home. It was easier for me to say no to going out. It was easier for me to not invite people to my home. And that's like, that is the real damage that emotional abuse can do. Because again, you look back in those moments and it feels like a choice that I was making for myself. I was making a choice to have peace, right? Like that's really what I was doing. I was guarding myself. I was putting up some barriers to keep my emotional well-being like okay, right? Um and so that felt like a choice, but the reality was is that like that was the only choice I had in order to maintain peace in my life. That is a real example of what isolation can look like in an emotionally abusive relationship. And the thing about that type of isolation is that it's really hard to sit down if you're in the moment. It's hard to sit down from, across the table from a friend and explain what's going on and for them to understand. If they've never walked in your shoes, if they've never been through an emotionally abusive relationship, it's so hard for someone to look in and see what's happening. And especially again because in that moment, I was defending my choices. And so this isolation partly came from me thinking I was being a good wife and I was being a loyal partner. That these were the things I had to do in a marriage to have a good marriage. There was also this emotional abuse generally, right, is about power and control. That's what all abuse is about. But emotional abuse really is makes someone feel very, very small. So my voice over time and my confidence over time just got smaller and smaller and smaller till it was like almost gone. And when that happens, the I I just started to isolate myself in a million other ways. So, for example, I loved dancing my whole life, and there was a moment where I wanted to get back into dancing, and I had found this adult like dance studio in town. It was the only one. It had just opened. I went to a class. I had a lot of fun, and I came back, and I was like telling my husband at the time, like, oh, I think I want to take classes. It's kind of be kind of expensive, but I think it'd be really fun. And he told me it was just a waste of time. And because my voice had become so small and my confidence had comes down so far, I couldn't push back anymore. Like I didn't push back at that because again, I wanted to maintain my own peace and my own safety. And so what did I do? Did I go to the dance class? Nope. I was like, meh, yeah, he's right. Maybe it is a waste of money. So I didn't go to the dance class, which is just another tiny example of how isolated I became again. There was this moment where I could have like stepped into this group of people that I would have had so much fun with, that I would have connected with. But instead, it felt like at the time that I made a decision to not do that. And it was based on money, or it was based on, it was a joint agreement between me and my husband, right? And what it was really doing was isolating me. It was isolating me from other people. It was isolating me from my own like hobbies and interests and things like that. And again, so hard to pinpoint in the moment because I couldn't say at the time, I couldn't say, oh, my husband told me I can't do that, because he didn't. He never did. Like, never once did he say, you can't go do that. You can't go here. You can't talk to that person. Never did. He just made it a lot easier to stay home and to not see the friends and to not see the family and to not engage in my hobbies. That is the real difficulty of isolation that comes from emotional abuse. And I think if you're watching this and you're in it right now, I think first of all, I just want you to know that you're not alone in it. Um, and it's also that it's so real. It's real. It's a real thing that other people have gone through, and you're not crazy for thinking that this is what's happening. You're not crazy. There are a bunch of resources that I always link in my videos. If you feel like you're in a place where you need those, go check them out. If you're out of a relationship like this, it is so beautiful when we turn around and share stories with each other. So if you have a story of what isolation looked like for you in your own relationship that you can now share with others to help them feel less alone, I really encourage you to do that in the comments. Um, because when we see ourselves in each other's stories, it gives other people confidence, right, to make these hard decisions, to make choices, to make changes. So I hope you do that if you're able. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video. I'm wishing you all the best. Cheers.